This Week in Virology, the podcast about viruses, the kind that make you sick. From Microbe TV, this is TWiV, This Week in Virology, episode 1264, recorded on October 23rd, 2025. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and you're listening to the podcast all about viruses. Joining me today from New York, Daniel Griffin.
Hello, everyone.
Without a bow tie.
Well, this is so that everyone actually knows it's Dr. Daniel Griffin.
That's right.
So.
Not like Dr. PhD, right?
Well, when people call you just doctor, I'm like, so which degree is getting left off? Is it the MD? Is it the PhD? You know, so.
I was in Germany, bought a train ticket, and on the ticket was printed, Herr Dr. Professor Racaniello.
Oh, I like that.
I don't know. I guess when I filled it in, I had to put all my titles in. Yeah, isn't that great? Herr Dr. Professor.
The Germans are very, they
respect. They have a lot of respect for education.
I think that's fantastic.
Which here apparently is getting less and less respect.
All right, well, let's jump in. We got a lot to cover today. So I'm starting off with a quotation by Brian Moynihan. He actually had some pretty good quotations, so I sort of picked this one out of the list. And then, I'll explain why. This is a marathon in life. You can't be sprinting all the time or else you wear yourself out. You have to make sure you're taking care of yourself, keeping yourself grounded, and not letting every little thing get you worked up. Not specifically for you, Vincent.
I don't let every little thing work me up. The big ones work me up.
There are some big ones.
I mean, the thing is that if you stay calm, then people will stay calm too, and they don't do anything. So you have to get worked up.
Yeah. No, I do think that there's a balance there. Yeah.
I mean, you can't scream, but people giving talks, they have to get a little worked up to show that they're passionate about what they're talking about, right?
Yeah. I mean, because things are not okay, as we'll go through, and I think it's important to send that message. So, and the other reason I picked this is, Vincent, I ran my marathon this last weekend.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
How'd you do?
So I did win, but as my my coach from high school pointed out, you only win because no one faster showed up, Daniel.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's jump into it. A little follow-up here on Chikungunya virus. New York health officials confirmed state's first locally acquired case of Chikungunya virus. So New York State Department of Health announced that a case of locally acquired Chikungunya has been confirmed. So the lab testing was done up at Wadsworth. That's sort of our state reference lab. And this is a case, Nassau County in Long Island, that's right here, right where I live, so just not very far. And this was locally acquired. So this is an individual who had not traveled, and this investigation suggests that this individual basically got bit by an infected mosquito. So the idea is is probably an Aedes mosquito, female, double biter. First bite bites someone who comes into the country with chikungunya. Second bite bites this person, and then transmits the chikungunya. So, this is not world, sky falling, anything like that. This can't be spread directly from person to person. So you really need that, 1% of female biting mosquitoes to bite one person, acquire the virus, and then bite a second person.
It's a really rare event because if there's one person coming in the country infected, then the mosquito bites them, and then that mosquito has to find another person. So, because you may ask, why hasn't this happened before? But it's such a rare event, right?
Yeah, and I don't think suddenly chikungunya is going to become endemic, but it does basically raise the spectrum. Like we've got the mosquitoes here for dengue, for chikungunya, for malaria. So, yeah, something to keep an eye on. All right, this is fun. We're going to have some fun here, Vincent. We're going to talk about aluminum or aluminum. How do you pronounce that?
Aluminum.
Aluminum. All right. We're all Americans.
Well, the Brits say aluminium.
Okay. So this is an article. It was in the New York Times by Christina Jewett. And we read, federal health officials are examining the feasibility of taking aluminum salts out of vaccines, a prospect that vaccine experts say would wipe out about half of the nation's supply of childhood inoculations and affect shots that protect against whooping cough, polio, and they say deadly flu. So the review at the FDA began after President Trump listed aluminum in vaccines as harmful during a press briefing. This is when he was talking about the unproven link between Tylenol and autism. So I thought for us, rather than stewing in the news, we would actually go to this recent article, which actually looked at this subject. It did not exactly find what RFK Jr. wanted, and he said, would you please retract this article? There's nothing wrong with it scientifically, but it just is not what I want it to say. So,
by the way, Daniel, polio doesn't have aluminum, and neither does flu vaccine. So I don't know what the New York Times article was saying.
Yeah. So, all right. So we jump into this article. The article, Aluminum Absorbed Vaccines and Chronic Diseases in Childhood, a nationwide cohort study. And this was just published this summer in the Annals of Internal Medicine. So they specifically looked at any safety concerns with aluminum in vaccines. And they share that their objective was to assess the association between cumulative aluminum exposure from early childhood vaccination and risk for autoimmune, atopic, allergic, or neurodevelopmental disorders. So this is a robust study. It's out of Denmark. They're going to look at 1,224,176 children born in Denmark between 1997 and 2018 who are alive and residing in the country at age 2. Now, since 1997, the Danish childhood vaccination program has offered, that is not mandated, they put that in brackets, offered but not mandated, an aluminum-absorbed vaccine for diphtheria, tetanus, acellular pertussis, inactivated poliovirus. So I guess theirs does. Is that right there, Vincent?
Well, I'm going to look it up while you're talking.
Excellent.
Because I thought it didn't.
And Hib in 3 doses in the first year of life. So they're getting this at 3, 5, 12 months. Aluminum absorbed PCV 7-valent was introduced in 2007. In 2010, we get to the 13-valent. This is typically co-administered with some of the other vaccines. And then the DTaP IPV booster. And so they kind of go through all this. Now, the aluminum content per dose of aluminum absorbed vaccine ranged from 0.125 to 1.0 milligrams. They examined 50 potentially adverse events, including 36 autoimmune, 9 atopic or allergic, 5 neurodevelopmental disorders. And they have some really nice figures. So figure 2, it actually displays cumulative aluminum exposure by age 2, and this ranges from 0 to 0.5 to greater than 4 to 4.5 milligrams, and sort of have a nice number of children. You can see most of the children are kind of clustering in this 2 to 3.5 range, but we have over 100,000 that are in that 4 to 4.5, and a number that are less than 2. And then Figure 3 is a forest plot where they look at all the outcomes. And guess what? Nothing to see here.
No.
I mean, if anything, right, there are a number of outcomes where more aluminum is actually associated with a statistically significantly better outcome.
Yeah. But of course, we don't know if clinically it makes any difference.
Yeah. But it's really,
The aluminum is fine. In fact, IPV alone does not have aluminum, but if you do the DTaP IPV, the DTaP has IPV.
So it's part of the combo.
It's part of it,
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you look at this, right? Like what about getting, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, 0.90? That's, 10% lower, and it's actually good confidence intervals there. They look at all the neurodevelopmental disorders, and 0.93, so actually slightly lower and statistically significant. But again, who knows if this is clinically relevant? But really, actually, no smoking gun, no suggestion here that the aluminum, is driving anything. So,
is this the study that RFK Jr. wanted withdrawn?
Yes, please withdraw this. It does, because I want to announce that aluminum is bad and this science is standing in the way of.
Such hubris.
Well. All right, bird flu. So, it's that time of year where, the birds are migrating overhead. And when everyone's like, oh, look how beautiful, I think, oh my gosh.
So bird flu, that's what they do, right?
Yeah,
Bird flu.
Yeah, that's how they get this disease from flying. That's why they call it the flu, the bird. No, bird influenza. And so we're hearing about new detections of the highly pathogenic avian flu in both commercial poultry and backyard birds. Notably, a commercial turkey farm. I bring this up because, it's Thanksgiving's on the horizon, but a commercial turkey farm in Swift County, Minnesota, that houses 34,000 birds is the site of the largest outbreak to hit the top turkey producing state in the nation. I guess maybe people need to start buying those frozen turkeys now, just in case we don't have any around for the end of November. For those of you outside the U.S., the end of November, we have this Thanksgiving celebration. It's a sort of a fall harvest festival, but we wear silly hats and make.
Daniel, I think the top turkey producing state is the District of Columbia.
Oh, I get the joke there. Now, Minnesota has seen the highest jump in activity with 17 commercial flocks, 2 backyard flocks, and almost 600,000 birds affected. And I'm seeing here, actually, it's not that the turkeys are produced in Washington, D.C., but something about Washington, D.C. attracts turkeys.
Yeah, it's not a state. I know. It's a district.
It's a district. And it attracts the turkeys.
It does.
It doesn't
and
actually
they stay there for a while.
Yeah, and they stay. And hopefully, yeah. All right. We're going to put a wall around. All right, Mpox. This has been in the news. Couple cases of Mpox caused by clade 1 versus the big outbreak we saw caused by clade 2 were reported in California. So these are 2 individuals, no international travel. It looks like this was acquired locally. Both infected people ended up hospitalized. Right now, they're recovering at home. And with the CDC having their troubles, apparently CIDRAP and the New England Journal of Medicine Evidence have combined. They have this plan to publish basically MMWR type reports when the CDC can't be doing it. So
I'm glad this is great, but the MMWR typically had CDC results, right?
That's really what it was. But, this was like if something was going on and, then the CDC would put it out there so we'd be aware. I mean, we first got the hint that like HIV was causing issues. And
right. So I don't know how they're going to supplant that, right? Because they don't do their own research. Right?
That's a challenge, right? Because a lot of us rely on the CDC collecting the data, and then we're sort of putting it out there and spreading the word. But yeah, are they going to be able to create as extensive a surveillance network as the CDC? That's a challenge. I really hope that the CDC and the U.S. government, my gosh, is open for business in the future at some point.
It's entirely possible that the CDC will be completely shut down.
It's headed that direction, yeah. So maybe we need to start thinking about these other avenues. And then this is enormous. Just think about the resources to replace what the CDC has been doing.
CDC was a world-class investigative unit for diseases. And, to think that the states can take up the slack is just wrong.
It's really true. I mean, this was one of the things that made America great, right? Is the world looked to the U.S. CDC for guidance on so many things. And now it's just we're in shambles. We pulled out of the WHO because we can do it better, and I think then we decided, well, you know what? We just lost interest. We're just not going to do anything. So pulling out of the WHO, not replacing it, letting our CDC fall apart. Not great. And in the line of not great, this news has me quite concerned. So this is an article. We read the title, and then I'm going to tell you why it caught my eye. So we have the article, Measles Without Rash During Acute Febrile Illness Surveillance in Tanzania, 2023 to 2024. And so this was published in CID. And what caught my eye was the without rash. Right? Because we sort of have this idea that, it's easy, measles, the sickest kid in the room, they get this characteristic rash. But is that true? do they always get that characteristic rash? I mean, so we consider it, I'm going to say in our hubris, to be so characteristic that it's actually part of the WHO definition of a clinical measles case. So here they do this study in Tanzania. They enroll 258 cases of acute fever, 48 controls that were admitted to one hospital in Tanzania for 1 year starting in February 2023. So, right, these kids are pretty darn sick to end up in the hospital in Tanzania. Blood was tested by blood culture, PCR for 35 pathogens, serology for 6 pathogens. Now, the leading pathogen detected was measles. 70 of the 258 they pick up by PCR, 74 of the 238 they pick up by serology. Now, other pathogens were detected less than 5% of the cases. They've got things like malaria, schistosomiasis, Bartonella. Now, here's what was really the most concerning, right? So only 64% of the measles cases were clinically suspected, and 30% of the measles cases did not have recorded rash. That's worrisome. So you got these febrile kids, you don't know what's going on, they're highly contagious, no rash.
Yep. Because you're not going to quarantine them without a rash, right?
You're not going to think. You're not going to be thinking of measles. So we can start testing everyone for measles, every febrile, miserable kid.
Yeah, so we always suspected there was a certain level of asymptomatic infection, right? Or a rash without rash. I don't know about other symptoms, right?
Yeah, I mean, these kids they didn't have a rash, but they were sick enough to be in the hospital, right? So,
yeah, right.
Yeah, so sort of, suggesting we probably were missing a lot. Well, we probably continue to miss a lot. So, because when we talk about cases in the U.S., we're only talking about confirmed, right? So,
sure,
kid's febrile, kid has a rash, and only then do we do the test, right? We're not testing kids without rashes.
And of course, this facilitates transmission, right? Because the kids are not suspected to have measles.
Yeah, so we're not doing anything, that we would normally do to keep the other kids and everyone else safe. So this is an interesting one. You're going to have to walk through. So this is an article titled "Frustration Grows Amid Measles Outbreak Quarantines Across Several States." And so the article takes a bit to dissect. So we read that the quarantine disruptions are prompting some pushback in the affected communities. For many in our community, they're frustrated, like, why don't you just get your kid vaccinated? Dr. Mishika Roberts, health commissioner for Columbus, Ohio, said in an interview. Measles exposures, including one at an early childhood learning center late last month, triggered the 21-day quarantine, she said. Now, these are kind of the things I'm trying to sort out. Now, so children who've been given the MMR vaccine, they don't have to quarantine if they're exposed. And 2 doses given around age 1 and again around age 5 are 97% effective in preventing measles infections. So with MMR vaccination starting at 12 months of age, this is really mostly impacting the people that chose not to vaccinate their children. All right? So I just thought it was sort of an interesting for the health commissioner.
The quarantine, you mean?
Quarantine, yep.
So if you have some kids in a class that are measles positive, they're going to be withdrawn and sent home, right? That's the idea.
So if you've got measles, you got to go home, so you're not going to spread it to everyone else. But then if that kid has been in the class, then the other kids in the classroom who were not vaccinated, they've got to go home for 21 days because they might go and develop measles in that time. You don't want them to spread it.
The vaccinated ones are okay.
Vaccinated ones get to stay.
So this is interesting. It says preventing measles infections, but I don't think it prevents infection because, the memory response is always delayed, but it probably reduces transmission substantially, right?
Yeah, we've talked about the study where it's about a 20-fold, right? So, actually 400-fold. So think of it this way. One child, unvaccinated, gets measles, on average spreads it to, let's say, 20 other people.
Yeah.
Child's vaccinated, gets measles, doesn't happen quite as often, but if they do, it probably takes 20 of those infected kids before they spread it to one onward. So it's like a 400-fold reduction in transmission, huge impact.
Right. So to answer the question, Daniel, why don't you just get your kid vaccinated?
Exactly.
Like, what's the problem?
I think it's the misinformation, right? It's all these, snake oil salesmen out there basically, spreading misinformation. This is an incredibly safe, effective vaccine. measles is not a great disease. It is not like the Brady Bunch. I mean, these kids, we've already had a couple deaths here in the U.S. We've had deaths in Canada. We've had a number of deaths in Mexico. A lot of kids have ended up in the hospital. And then for the next 2 to 3 years, their mortality risk is increased. And then we have all the late stuff and the wiping out of their immune memory. I mean, this is bad stuff.
No, this outbreak should not exist in the U.S. Fundamentally wrong.
Yeah, I mean, we're about to lose our status, right, of having measles eradicated in January, and we're pretty much on track for losing that status. I mean, measles is now endemic here. And we hear about more than 100 cases of measles reported in Utah and Arizona. The new outbreak began in August and has sickened more than 100 people, making it the second largest cluster of cases in the country this year, right behind Texas. And the majority of cases, again, unvaccinated. A lot of parallels here at the Utah-Arizona border and the outbreak that exploded from the west edge of Texas. So both started rural towns, sizable population of children who'd not been immunized. Both outbreaks, the virus traveled to a neighboring state and took root in similar vulnerable pockets. We have some good news here. Not only did I pull some numbers off the Hopkins measles tracker, but the CDC was updated as of October 21st. We got an update, 1,618 confirmed measles cases. So I think that might be a little bit of an underestimate, as we've been talking about, right? And up there in Canada, another 30 new cases. They're up to 5,090. So what to do, right? Number one, just get vaccinated. Oh my gosh, never miss an opportunity to vaccinate. But we also have this article, which I was thinking of you when I was reading this and pasting it in, Vincent. So susceptibility of measles virus to WHO, hand rubs, oral and surface disinfectants, published in Open Forum Infectious Disease. In this study, they tested virus inactivation by common oral rinses as primary transmission occurs via aerosols and droplets. They used a quantitative suspension assay in accordance with European guidelines. They further looked at WHO recommended hand rub formulations based on ethanol and 2-propanol. The reason I was thinking about you is I feel like they did this correctly. They actually looked for cytopathic effect in these cell culture assays. It wasn't like none of that darn PCR trying to make believe that somehow measures active viral replication.
Yeah, that's good.
And it looks like things work, right? So
yeah, there's a good reduction with these treatments.
Yeah. So basically, they conclude the virus was effectively inactivated by the WHO recommended hand rub formulations, oral rinses, surface disinfectants. Basically, these are effective standard hygiene measures that we can be using. I thought it was, so they're using chlorhexamide forte, Listerine Cool Mint Mild, Listerine Total Care, Meridol Gum Protection.
Mm-hmm.
So even Listerine Smart Kids. So I thought that was cute there.
And ethanol and propanol, they work too.
They work great, yeah. So, all right, flu. I think we were talking about the fact that in Asia, we were starting to see about a 6-week early uptick. And we're hearing that they're starting to see some increasing flu activity in the UK as well. So consultant epidemiologist Dr. Connell Watson emphasized the importance of vaccination. And we have a quotation. This week's data showing a rise in positive tests for flu, particularly in children and young adults, as well as an increase in GP and A&E, accident and emergency attendances. It's relatively early in autumn to be seeing these increases, and we will be monitoring this closely in the coming weeks. All right. I think one of our listeners will be excited because we read that the makers of Xofluza, Roche, launched direct-to-consumer U.S. sales of its influenza antiviral pill Xofluza at a discounted cash price of $50, following similar moves by rivals as they scramble to address pressure from the Trump administration to lower prescription drug prices paid by Americans. So the Xofluza cash price offered by Roche's U.S. biotech unit Genentech are 70% below list price, available to insured and uninsured patients from Alto Pharmacy and Mark Cuban Cost Plus Drug Company. Same-day delivery will be available via Alto Pharmacy. And, a couple things. So the Swiss maker already offers a coupon for Xofluza that brings the out-of-pocket cost down to $35 for some insured and uninsured patients. So what happened here, and I'm going to leave in a link because, of course, I'm like, I'll read the news article, but I want to see if this is really true. So you can actually go to this link, www.xofluza.com, and you can actually see this $50 cash option. You can click either on the Visit Alto or the Visit Cost Plus Drugs, the Mark Cuban site. You still need a prescription, by the way. But the backstory here was that a bunch of these 17 major drug companies got a letter from Trump in July, basically demanding that they charge U.S. patients the same price as people pay in other high-income countries, create direct-to-consumer channels, and increase investment in the U.S. And if you don't do that, we're going to impose a 100% tariff on branded drugs.
So, Daniel, this is good. It's fine. But at the same time, they're cutting Medicare and Medicaid, right? So what's the point of this? And they're charging people tariffs. So
I think the key is that you've got to get your vaccine and you got to get early treatment with Xofluza, because if you end up in the hospital, oh my gosh, who's going to pay that bill?
No, I totally agree. I think it's a great idea to lower the price, but it's not consistent with all the other crap they're pulling.
Yeah, and let's not take away people's actual healthcare, coverage. So, and actually, this will be maybe more for the clinicians out there. There was a really nice publication, JID Volume 232 issue supplement, Advances in Influenza Therapeutics. And this supplement has 17 articles, and it goes through all various aspects of advances in influenza therapeutics, diagnostic, rapid access strategies, resistance monitoring, seasonal, zoonotic, pandemic flu. They've got, use of influenza antivirals in pandemic response, use of influenza antivirals to prevent transmission. There's even an article there on monoclonals that have been explored, none have actually made it to licensing, but just really interesting because, as maybe our listeners remember, we were surprised to end up with a coronavirus pandemic. We were expecting a flu, an influenza pandemic. So that specter has not gone away. So important for everyone to be up to date on the options. All right, RSV. We've got a nice article here, Estimated Vaccine Effectiveness for a Respiratory Syncytial Virus-Related Acute Respiratory Illness in Older Adults, Findings from the First Post-Licensure Season, published in CID. So thanks to Kaiser Permanente, Southern California, they've got this retrospective test negative case control study of adults aged 60 and over, and they're looking for acute respiratory infection, ED visits or hospitalizations. And this is 24 November 2023 to 9 April 2024. This is one of those test negatives. So case patients tested positive for RSV. Controls were negative for RSV, human metapneumovirus, flu, SARS-CoV-2, positive for a non-vaccine preventable pathogen. We've got 8,965 acute respiratory illness ED visits, hospitalizations. About 7.8% of the patients had RSV. And then they're going to look here, and 0.3% had gotten that vaccine, compared with 3.6% control. So we get a vaccine efficacy of 92%. So really not bad.
What are we measuring efficacy as?
So this is going to be ending up in the ED or hospitalized, right? So that's going to be our 92%. And then they actually look at some other outcomes. So they're looking at ending up in the ICU, dying. There were 90% severe disease, 92% reduction. So
92% is very good.
I mean, across the board, all these numbers are really good.
Excellent.
Yeah, 92% against ED, 92% against, ending up with critical outcomes. Yeah.
And I think as we move on, they'll do another one of these to see how long it lasts.
That's a big thing, right? Because at this point, we're just doing that one RSV shot.
Right.
And so, and now I should probably update people, right? Like who is eligible for the RSV shot? So everyone 75 and older can get the RSV vaccine. If you're 50 to 74, but you have an increased risk of RSV disease, you can actually go ahead and get an RSV vaccine. All right, so a lot of people are eligible. COVID update. Disappointing. I looked and there's no multicolor. So I don't know what's going on, Vincent.
It's too bad. It was such a nice chart, right?
And it was nice to look at and see where we are. I mean, maybe the timing of the government shutdown, they knew we were in a little bit of a lull. So when the government opens again, I don't know when the government's going to open again. So.
But we don't have any other sites that do that. There's one other, but it doesn't have the nice graph.
Yeah. Now you have wastewater saying we're kind of at moderate level in the Wastewater Scan, but not the same really nice tracking that the CDC was delivering. All right. And moving to long COVID, and this is a study that needed to be done, and here we have the results. The article, Effectiveness of Colchicine for the Treatment of Long COVID, a randomized clinical trial published in JAMA Internal Medicine. So proper, double-blind, one-to-one randomized clinical trial, recruited patients with confirmed SARS-CoV-2 infection and persistent symptoms, 8 hospitals, 6 states in India between January 2022 and July 2023. Individuals were eligible if they had functional limitations, so post-COVID-19 functional status scale grade 2 or more, and elevated inflammatory markers. They're really trying to make sure they're really getting the right people here. So high CRP, they had this elevated neutrophil lymphocyte ratio, and then they assessed outcomes at 12, 26, and 52 weeks after randomization. So they're picking the people that they think are going to potentially benefit. Data was analyzed. The primary outcomes was change in distance walk during a 6-minute walk test from baseline to 52 weeks. They looked at a number of secondary outcomes, so changes in these inflammatory markers, patient-reported outcome measures, such as quality of life, anxiety, depression, fatigue, dyspnea, and they did all this with validated instruments. Unfortunately, basically, at 52 weeks, there was no difference that they were finding. So similar null findings across all these predefined outcomes.
Someone asked me on stream last night, what fraction of people who develop long COVID will eventually recover?
So the majority will recover. That's a number we've sort of been talking about. So it depends how you define getting them in there. So that's like 3 months have this sort of chronic fatigue type of long COVID syndrome. We say that, over 90% of those folks are better at a year. But some of the post-sequelae of COVID, right? Having an MI, having a stroke, developing diabetes, those people don't get better. That's now, part of their life going forward. Or some of the fibrosis, scarring of the lungs or heart, those can be permanent as well. So,
but about 90% recover in a year.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. And as we've been saying for a while, no one is safe until everyone is safe. This is, I think, our last recording in October, or second to last, right? We're going to have one more next week, maybe. But we're still in the middle of our American Society of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene fundraiser. We're doubling your donations. I guess our next one will drop on the 1st of November. So we'll record another but this is probably your last time to jump in and help support our fundraiser. We're hoping to double your donations. We want to get up to that maximum donation of $20,000. No one is safe until everyone is safe. So be part of this. Thank you.
It's time for your questions for Daniel. You can send yours to daniel@microbe.tv. Jill writes, my husband is 62 in excellent health, no underlying health issues. He will be traveling to Japan in November, Portugal in April. Will be getting COVID before going to Japan, as well as flu. After hearing Vincent mention on a recent podcast that he was able to get a prescription for Paxlovid from his doctor so he could have the medication while traveling internationally, I suggested my husband contact his doctor about doing the same. His doctor told him he's very hesitant to prescribe Paxlovid to patients who aren't at high risk of complications. In my husband's case, he feels the risks of taking Paxlovid outweigh the benefits, and he's concerned about COVID becoming resistant to the antiviral if it's prescribed too frequently. My understanding is that Paxlovid is appropriate for anyone over 50, that being over 50 automatically puts you at higher risk for complications, regardless of their health status, or anyone under 50 who has an underlying condition. I haven't heard you mention anything about serious risks from Paxlovid or virus resistance. Are these actual concerns?
So I appreciate, actually, this is a great opportunity for us to sort of remind our listeners of some of the studies we've discussed. And they have specifically looked at the, over 1 million exposures of Paxlovid. And has this impacted the virus? Is the virus becoming resistant? And the answer is no. The virus is not becoming resistant. And we're lucky that there's something about this target, the protease, where the Paxlovid does not really generate resistance mutants. I don't know. Vincent, any thoughts?
Yeah, we don't see it. It must be that the resistance confer reduced fitness, so it's not viable. Right.
Yeah. So, and certainly no onward transmission of any resistant Paxlovid resistance. So, yep. So,
and there are no serious side effects, right?
It's really well tolerated as long as there are no drug-drug interactions. I understand the physician sort of thinking, like worried about, antimicrobial stewardship and are we going to prescribe it too frequently? Yeah. Fortunately, this is one of those situations where this is not an antimicrobial stewardship concern. I appreciate the thinking, but yeah, the doc is welcome to listen to our podcast, which I'm sure they won't, and where we discuss that the literature should make him feel more comfortable.
Charmaine writes, last email from a listener you read on Clinical Update 1260 was a wonderful and frustrating rant about the difficulty of obtaining a COVID vaccine in Georgia that included that when the pharmacy put Spikevax into the system, it said her insurance wouldn't cover it. Then she went to Medicare and it was covered. Having worked as a federal technocrat for over 30 years, I have a suggestion. Sometimes the stupid computer program will respond to only particular words. I would have put in Moderna or NextSpike, and if that doesn't work, try Pfizer, Comirnaty, Novavax, or Nuvaxovid, and double-check the spelling. Then she can have her doc write the prescription for whatever goes through. Probably easier than getting anyone on the phone at Medicare, even in normal times, but especially now with a government shutdown. Imagine getting someone to try all those different words, right?
I guess that's what you have to do. I mean, it's confusing. My mother-in-law went to go get her Novavax, and they're like, "Oh yeah," and then she saw this is the Nuvaxovid. I don't want that. I want the Novavax. So it's very confusing for people to. So
Gail writes, I was told by a pharmacist who consulted with an ID doctor that PEMGARDA's efficacy is very likely reduced and may not be effective at all preventing the current variants of COVID. He said that due to the current situation, the NIH and the person in charge, tests are no longer being done, which would give us that information. So do you agree that it's possible that PEMGARDA may not be effective at preventing COVID? Also, would a spike protein test be useful to determine someone's antibody response to a recent COVID vaccine, or wouldn't it be very useful since it shows people's antibody response to spike of COVID's original version?
Yeah, so this is a great question. And I went and, which I rarely do, looked at the emails a little ahead of time. I was a little ahead of schedule, which just doesn't always happen in my life. And on TWiV 1260, we actually discussed the article, the canopy results, right? So these were the results where they were looking at PEMGARDA, yeah, I guess that's what it's called. PEMGARDA. So, and basically, there's a couple things. So, the efficacy is impacted by the variants, but one of the things we've talked about early on when the monoclonals were out there, they would do these pseudovirus assays, but that doesn't always take into account all the impact of the antibodies, right? So the FC and these other things. So there probably is some reduction in the efficacy, but as we saw from that study, it looks like there is continued efficacy, and the efficacy there was 74 to 84% relative risk reduction symptomatic COVID-19. So, again, I sort of understand the thinking about efficacy is likely reduced, but I don't think it's gone. And, still certain populations where we do recommend this.
Tricia writes, I was excited to hear you cover the paper on H5N1 and raw milk cheese. I had seen the headlines, but had not had the time to investigate the details. However, I would like to add some clarification. Your discussion of cheese making led me to believe that you have never actually made cheese.
That is true.
And the description you offered was confusing. We make cheese every year in my microbiology class as a way to talk about fermentation and applied microbiology. In your discussion, you spoke as if everyone starts with raw milk and somehow the cheese gets heated sometimes and maybe not other times. What actually happens is that you start with either raw milk, bad, or pasteurized milk, good. There is some heating of the milk during the process, but it's not enough to pasteurize the milk or you would kill the starter culture. So you have to start with pasteurized milk. The proponents of raw milk postulate that the drop in pH caused by the fermentation would be enough to kill pathogens, but there is a rich literature showing that is not true. This most recent paper adds another pathogen to the list of pathogens that could survive the cheese-making process. I'm not an expert in food microbiology. This is just one class exercise, so maybe your other listeners can add more detail. By the way, I highly recommend that you try making your own cheese. There is a 30-minute mozzarella recipe that is quite tasty, and ricotta is one of the easiest and quickest cheeses to make if you want to try something simple.
All right. I pasted in a cheese-making 30-minute mozzarella recipe, Vincent. I asked my daughter, Daisy, about, have you ever made cheese? She said, of course, Daddy. I'm like, okay, so yes.
Well, just make sure you start with pasteurized milk.
Oh, yes. I'm joking. I certainly will.
All right. David writes, I've been listening since 2019, and I'm excited to finally have a question. I'll be living in Metro Manila for the next year and have been going through recommended vaccinations through my doctor and travel medications offered by Costco. However, one vaccine that wasn't discussed with me was tuberculosis, which, from what I can tell, is still a problem in the Philippines, mostly in rural areas I won't be. I was born in 1977, and best I can tell, TB was never a part of the vaccine schedule I had as a child. Is the BCG vaccine safe to take as an adult or something I should not consider at my age? Surprisingly, my GP is not finding too much information about this, and perhaps something I need to find when I arrive overseas. I've protected myself from Japanese encephalitis, rabies, hepatitis, COVID, flu, etc. Also looking for advice here. Also, my doc could not answer if the flu shot in the U.S. was any different from the flu shots I'd receive in East Asia.
All right. So, so let's talk about the BCG shot. So really the evidence supporting the use of BCG is really a reduction in some of the childhood tuberculosis complications, particularly TB meningitis. So even like our State Department, if you have a young child under 5, for instance, there still might be a recommendation for BCG vaccine. A lot of parts of the world, you get the BCG vaccine right around birth. If you're getting it 1, 2, 3, a little bit older, actually, these are a lot of the people who maintain that sort of positive PPD reaction much more than past 18, 20 years of age. In general, we don't recommend BCG vaccination for adults, even if they're going to one of these TB endemic areas. Looking through your vaccines otherwise here, it looks like you're, get your rabies series, Japanese encephalitis, hepatitis, COVID, flu. I would have to check whether or not typhoid would be appropriate as well, but looks like you're on the right track.
You know if the flu shot in the U.S. is different from East Asia flu
I believe
shot?
it's the same. I mean, we track, and usually it's the same flu that circulates. So,
David writes, thanks for keeping my science and vaccine knowledge up to date and helping me keep my brain safe from the legion of pseudoscience out there.
And the brainworms. Don't forget the brainworms.
That's TWiV Weekly Clinical Update with Dr. Daniel Griffin. Thank you, Daniel.
Oh, thank you. And everyone, be safe.